My initial reaction after reading the book of Genesis was something along the lines of...
But this is weird. Weird and bad.
Rereading some of the more famous stories of the Bible with a more mature mind was certainly an eye-opening experience, to say the least, and I can certainly say that the stories where God commits genocide on the entire world by drowning every living thing except a few organisms residing in a tiny ark, and cursing his own creations to suffer death and pain for simple curiosity and seeking the knowledge of right and wrong when they had no concept of right and wrong beforehand and thus weren't actually choosing evil by eating the fruit, certainly did not age well for me. Honestly, Genesis was probably the book of the Bible I knew the most about, other than the other Gospels, before reading it myself, but there were still a ton of super weird stories in it that I never knew about. I mean, in one of the chapters, Jacob literally gets into a wrestling match with God in human form, and God loses. No joke. But the stories were not just weird, but also downright horrible at times, and I was just completely caught off guard at times with how much I never knew was in this totally kid-friendly book, appropriate for all ages. I mean, take this example, the completely wholesome story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah.
Abe, I'd like to introduce you to the family you convinced me to save.
Oh, very good.
This is Moab and Ben.
Hello there, kids.
This is their father, Lot, the only righteous man in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Pleased to meet thee, Lot.
Oh, and this is their grandfather, Lot, the only righteous man in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, pleased to meet you.
Daddy tried to have us gang raped.
Haha, yeah, I did.
Hooray for incest. I mean, seriously, why are copies of this just given out to children like candy? They should absolutely be given an adult rating for depictions of graphic violence and inappropriate sexual content. Throughout all the uncomfortable weirdness in the book of Genesis, I certainly can't say I ever gained any wisdom, and the character of Yahweh just kind of came across as an incredibly petty and sadistic asshole. I mean, believe it or not, though, at the time I actually thought the quality of storytelling in the Bible had nowhere to go but up.
I was wrong.
Yeah, the book of Exodus is a steaming pile of crap. It is hot garbage, containing incredibly drawn-out and boring sentence structure, entire pages full of ridiculous laws, and some of the most morally deplorable actions in the Bible, and that is seriously saying a lot. I mean, seriously, all that talk in Catholic school about how God cares about our free will and would never do anything to inhibit it, well, forget that, because in the Escape from Egypt story, Pharaoh was originally going to let the Israelites go after the first few plagues, but God, good old lovable Yahweh, intentionally bypassed the Pharaoh's free will and manipulated his heart into keeping the Israelites in Egypt. And why would he do such a horrible thing that is actively detrimental to his own people, you may ask? In his own words, no joke, he just wanted to show off. Wow. Just wow. I mean, there are really not many more incriminating examples of God's pure selfishness and egotism as portrayed in the Bible than this. And if you can actually believe it, after Exodus, the story just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Like, seriously, I was so incredibly blown away when I was first reading. I mean, I just kept thinking to myself, well, this has got to be the worst thing in the entire Bible, only to have my expectations thoroughly subverted, and the Bible to sink even lower. I mean, slavery in the Bible? Well, as long as you don't kill your slave and you take it from a non-Israelite race, then you can feel free to beat it as much as you like. Rape in the Bible? Well, it should generally be avoided, but as long as you rape a virgin and then pay her father a sum of money to marry her afterwards, it's totally fine. Genocide in the Bible? Well, nothing is wrong with that as long as the people being slaughtered are non-Israelites. Actually, you know what? Screw it. If the Israelites are misbehaving, then you can go ahead and slaughter them too. Because remember, God commands it, so it must be just. I honestly wanted to throw up at some of the passages that I was reading, and the horror contained within this book would just not let up. Whenever I actually mentioned some of the things that I was reading to other Christians to voice my distaste, the response I pretty much always got was, well, that's the Old Testament. You just need to wait until you get to the New Testament, where Jesus shows up, and it will be nothing but joy and kindness and puppies and kittens. Okay, yeah, but what about all the horrifying stuff that is still within the Old Testament?
Never happened, but nope, everything's fine.
The Old Testament makes up 75% of the book you supposedly believe in.
Nothing bad ever happened. Ever.
Honestly, this is really just one of the absolute stupidest arguments that a Christian could possibly make, as I've never really met a single Christian in my life who doesn't believe that the Old Testament is the actual Word of God. I mean, they all say the Ten Commandments are pretty important, don't they? Those are in the Old Testament. And if God is unchanging and always moral, then why would he be less moral in the Old Testament than in the New Testament? It doesn't make any sense. But honestly, at the time, I kind of listened to those people and what they had to say, and while I was reading the Old Testament initially, I was really holding out for the New Testament and trying to keep an open mind and search for any good that could possibly be in the Bible. But I just struggled so hard to find a single piece of actually good advice in the passages I was reading. By the time I had gotten through only 6 books of the Bible, a little less than the equivalent length of the entire New Testament, it became blindingly obvious to me that the Bible was not a book of wisdom, and the God portrayed in it was not a God of love, but an evil, oppressive tyrant, and no amount of preachings of love and forgiveness found in the New Testament I might read could ever forgive or excuse the complete and utter moral debauchery present in nearly every single chapter of every single book in the Old Testament that I had been reading. Also, just as an aside, it was by about this point that Satanism started to make a whole lot more sense to me as a religion/philosophy. I mean, Satan really only does kill a total of 10 people in the Bible, whereas God is responsible for the death of almost 3 million. And those are only numbered kills. Who knows how many people he drowned in the Great Flood and a bunch of other genocides. And then, about at the end of my junior year, I had come to a bit of a realization. I was almost completely sure that the spiteful, psychotic, sadistic, controlling, genocidal maniac found in the Bible was nothing but an invention of a primitive Middle Eastern desert tribe in order to scare people into obeying their leaders, and if he did exist, I would gladly burn in hell for all eternity rather than submit to him. And then it hit me. Why do I actually still believe in God anymore? I really couldn't think of any reason why God would be the only answer or even the most likely answer as to how the universe came to be, and this holy book that had billions of followers all around the world turned out to be completely ridiculous. Why would it also not be the case that every other holy book and religion in the world was equally ridiculous? I already knew the base claims that other religions made, and they seemed just as ridiculous as the claims of the Bible, only I was indoctrinated in the Bible, so before the claims of Christianity just seemed normal to me. And that was the ticket. Indoctrination. If any religion was actually true, that fact would be plainly obvious for all to see. But religion is a sham, and it preserves itself through the indoctrination of children to believe and have absolute faith in ridiculous claims from the moment they learn to speak. So by that time I didn't have much reason to believe the validity of any religious claims anymore, and I had no reason to believe in God. I was now an atheist. However, though the Bible ended up converting me to atheism, my journey away from the faith was not yet complete. Because when I deconverted at the time, I was still very much a passive atheist, meaning I was just content to keep my beliefs to myself, because I thought that even though belief in God is completely and utterly ridiculous, he's not really hurting anyone, and, people should be able to believe what they believe, because all beliefs are deserving of respect, no matter how dumb they are. And plus, nearly everyone I knew were Christians, and they were all really nice, so who was I to tell them that they were wrong? At least that's what I initially thought to myself. However, around that time, I was going through a bit of a paradigm shift in my life, and a lot of things were really changing in terms of how I saw the world. My interests had expanded quite a bit outside of just science like before, and I was trying to study all kinds of things like history, philosophy, psychology, government and politics, and just a lot of general stuff, because I felt as though I didn't have as much of a knowledge of the world outside of what I had been taught, and I wanted to expand my horizons. And through my research, I gained a much greater perspective of the world than I had before, and after rethinking a lot of things, my political and ideological stance pretty much became completely unrecognizable compared to just a few years before. One topic in particular that I was interested in at the time was learning more about the LGBTQ community. See, while I'm aromantic myself, I don't really identify that much with the community. However, I still found the concept of sexual and gender minorities interesting, and as I said before, my sex education in Catholic school was, pretty lacking, so the only thing I really learned about that kind of stuff yet was that if you're gay, you shouldn't act on it. However, whereas before I was more interested in learning about sexuality in more scientific and clinical terms, I had sort of become much more interested in the actual social and character aspect of those falling under the LGBTQ spectrum, and how they were treated by the world around them. To be honest, I was originally under the impression that gay people were pretty much treated fairly and equally by almost everyone in the United States. Oh, what a little bubble I was living in. I became fascinated by hearing stories about how LGBTQ individuals were abused and rejected simply on the basis of their identity, because to me it was something I couldn't even really fathom. I mean, I couldn't understand what justification you could have for treating a person differently on the basis of their sexuality. However, one thing that stood out to me as a commonality present in nearly every instance of homophobic experiences that LGBTQ individuals shared from the United States was the common theme that the people perpetuating the abuse and prejudice were almost always doing so on religious grounds, usually Christianity. And this really surprised me at the time. I mean, I really don't know why it surprised me, since I was taking a theology course that taught me that gay marriage is wrong, and was in the process of reading a holy book that says all homosexuals should be stoned to death. But I mean, I really don't know why I was surprised at all. The fact that there were a ton of Christian homophobes should have been obvious to me. Well, I mean, I guess it was just jarring to hear, because while there were certainly things taught in theology class that were a bit concerning to me, I never really saw any of it manifest in any real hate or malicious intent. The Catholic teachings I got were more about acceptance and loving of LGBTQ and gay people, while still not approving of certain lifestyle choices. Love the sinner, hate the sin, that kind of thing. I mean, at the time I was well aware that some people used religion to justify violence and bigotry, but that was only a completely insignificant sector of the population, right? Well, as I began to do more research on the world and the harmful ways religion had affected some people in the past and still does in the present, my opinion began to change, and I was starting to see religion as less and less of a neutral force in the world and far away from anything entirely positive. As I started researching radical forms of Christianity, they started to seem more and more similar to me to radical forms of Islam, which I guess shouldn't have been surprising, since both religions are literally cut from the same cloth. However, as this transition of thought was taking place, when I was searching for LGBTQ-related content online, I happened to click on one video titled, "What do all these LGBTQ labels mean?" that would lead to a series of events that would change the remainder of my life forever.
Welcome to a very special episode of Dear Mr. Atheist, and today we are talking about labels and what they mean. If you've been on the internet and you've been to any discussion that is about gender, sexual orientation, romantic orientation, undoubtedly you have seen people who get upset, make it about themselves, and ask, how am I meant to know all of these labels and what they mean?
Mr. Atheist, a YouTube channel run by ex-Mormon activist Jimmy Snow, was the kind of channel I had never really seen before. Because while pretty much every other channel I had come across on YouTube was largely secular in nature, I didn't watch any religious channels, his channel was the first I had actually come across that was actively anti-religion, and he took pride in being identified with atheism and humanism. When I first got introduced to him, it was very jarring to hear someone so heavily criticizing not just certain beliefs that are sometimes found within religion, but religion itself. At first, when I came across his channel, I thought he was like a radical or something with how he was condemning Christian belief, but I was still interested in what he had to say, because while it was a perspective I had never heard before. So I ended up subscribing to him, and over time I came to the realization that what he had to say was actually making a lot of sense to me. And after watching his channel for a time, YouTube started recommending me to other atheist channels, and before I knew it, I was plunged headfirst into the atheist community of the internet, which was something I had never even imagined existing before. I mean, really, how do you make a community out of not believing in something? It seemed crazy to me, but it was also fascinating and well, and in not much time I found myself watching dozens of atheist YouTube channels and was gorging down their content full throttle. I mean, Non-Stamp Collector, Holy Kool-Aid, Theremin Trees, 43 Alley, Cosmic Skeptic, Genetically Modified Skeptic, Steve Shives. Well, okay, maybe not Steve Shives. I mean, I've never been blocked before, and I still want to maintain some essence of virtual virginity, I guess. But also in addition, Dark Matter 2525, TMM, Telltale, Friendly Atheist, The Atheist Experience, The Thinking Atheist, and Aaron Ra, just to name a few. And you know what? Almost every single time the arguments presented to me from these channels were expressed, they made complete and total sense. It was like these people were expertly explaining what bothered me about Christianity, but I could never really explain well or put into so many words myself before. And they were even pointing out things about Christianity that I never even realized before. It was obvious that these people weren't arrogant, but were intellectual and rational, and actually seemed to represent the Bible accurately from what I had read of it so far. But the one thing that I think I appreciated most of all about their content that I was watching was that many of the videos on these were actual responses to other Christian content. And they weren't just responding to straw-man religious arguments and intentionally misrepresenting the other side. And that's significant because that is exactly what was happening in my religion class in high school. Never once, not one time in theology class did we ever get introduced to the opposition. We never watched an atheist video. We never had atheist speakers. We never read atheist literature. We never learned about this perspective of atheism in religion class because we were simply indoctrinated to think one type of way. Never were we to even seek out the beliefs of non-Catholics that differed from ours or even read the Bible that we were supposed to be following. No, we were just supposed to accept the watered-down version that we were taught, that ignored most of the horrific violence and completely ridiculous rules that Christians would be all too eager to sweep under the rug. We were specifically instructed to not doubt what we were told. Oh, don't get me wrong, it was fine to question, as long as those questions led us back to a belief in God, but actually doubting his existence was sinful and would be punished with hellfire if not corrected. But these atheists on YouTube did not manipulate and indoctrinate their audience, with some exceptions. They instead actively encouraged their audience to seek out the views of all kinds of different sects of Christianity and other faiths to question everything they had been told. They were not afraid to confront or debate the opposing side head-on and did not try to hide or misrepresent their arguments because they were afraid that those that listened to them might be corrupted by Christians, because Christians did not make convincing and thought-out arguments against them. They didn't feel the need to use apologetics because apologetics are a ridiculous way of misrepresenting text in order to service an agenda. And these atheist channels, in turn, led me to discover a lot of Christian channels on YouTube. And while there were a lot of Christian moderates on YouTube, there were also a lot of Christians I found with radical, bigoted, and just flat-out unintelligible beliefs.
Evolution, the science of confusion. Because of all the missing links, they don't know what to do. Evolution, incredible delusion. They tell us that we started out as just a glob of goo.
Oh yeah, that's another reason why I liked atheist content a lot more than Christian content. It's actually funny, and the people in the videos have clever jokes that aren't complete cringe.
Oh shit. You guys don't have any bars up in heaven? Fuck.
Oh yeah, the cable guy is supposed to die today sometime between 10 and 2, so he should be here pretty soon.
Figure the signal will be great up here. It's supposed to be heaven, right? I mean, Jesus.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to take your son's name in vain there.
Getting off on that little tangent though, no matter how many Christian videos I watched, each with different perspectives, but arguing for pretty much the same thing, all the arguments just seemed to fall flat for me. They didn't make sense, they weren't consistent, a lot of them were just really silly, and most didn't even hold up to basic scrutiny from other online atheists. But not only was I introduced to a whole host of arguments against Christianity that never even popped into my head before, but the more and more I researched, the more and more I saw how religion was not only ridiculous, but could be incredibly toxic and a harmful force in the world. I saw how a lot of people were using it to justify discrimination, cruelty, and bigotry, how it encouraged ignorance as well as a consistent force in opposition to scientific and human rights progression, how it was constantly influencing politics in the nation, leading to things like the majority of U.S. states having absolutely abysmal sex education standards. And all of these things were only in the United States, a nation founded on largely secular ideals. Is not taking into account apostates put to death by Muslims in the Middle East, supposed witches being burned by Christians in Africa, and untouchables being oppressed by the Hindu caste system in India. It became clear to me that religion, Christianity or otherwise, was not, nor had it ever been, a neutral force in the world, and was far away from anything positive, but instead is often a largely manipulative tool used to try to control the thoughts and behaviors of others. In the developing nations of the world, like the United Kingdom, Sweden, and increasingly the United States, religion was becoming less and less prevalent, and I had come to realize that that was a good thing, because religion is not necessary for a healthy society and often tends to lose its influence when societies are happy, healthy, and educated, because religion preys upon the unfortunate, unfulfilled, and ignorant. I realized that atheists were not immoral, and many of the atheists that I came across on YouTube were humanists and cared deeply about their fellow man and were incredibly principled. They were fierce defenders of freedom of religion and free speech, with some exceptions, who cared a lot about the world and wanted to create a more just and more accepting and empathetic society, free from bigotry. Again, some exceptions, and actually this might be a better example. Now at this point I'm guessing that what I'm saying might come across as a bit insulting to any Christians watching this video, and I must emphasize that while I am extremely critical of your religion, I don't have any hatred for Christians themselves. As I said before, I grew up in a community of people that was almost entirely Christian, and the majority of them were very nice and reasonable people, but my journey to atheism recontextualized for me why they were actually good people, because they really weren't following the actual Word of God very closely and were disregarding incredibly concerning things that were taught in theology class. In reality, I would say most Christians I know are living lives as if God doesn't really exist on a day-to-day basis, and making autonomous decisions for themselves and not worrying about whether or not their actions and beliefs are in tandem with their religion, and that's how it should be. That's not to say that all atheists are good people. That's obviously not true. Again, just take this white supremacist asshole. Being an atheist doesn't make you rational, and it doesn't make you a better person, but it does leave you room to actually think critically on issues, rather than constantly using your religion as a crutch to try to justify or rationalize whatever beliefs you hold. Time and time again, I was shown how the truly bigoted and idiot Christians who were claiming that evolution was a lie and that the end times were coming and that atheists and homosexuals should be put to death were the fundamentalist Christians. You know, the ones who actually followed the Bible they believed in. For the most part, anyway, unlike Christian moderates who often resort to using the good old, we don't have to follow the Old Testament because Jesus argument, even though Jesus literally said anyone who abandons the letter of the old law will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. By this point, I was no longer a passive atheist, but was instead an adamant one, an anti-theist, viewing religion as generally harmful to society and dedicated to the spreading of purely secular values in place of religious dogma to everyone. Or at least I was in my head, anyway. I had been fed lies my entire life, and the worst part was that the people telling them somehow didn't even know they were lies themselves. And that pissed me off. I mean, having gone so far down the atheist rabbit hole by that point, I felt like I simply couldn't keep my beliefs to myself anymore. I had to tell someone. While I had no shame whatsoever in my beliefs, I was still very concerned and worried what people might think, as I had heard tons of stories from atheists online about people who were basically disowned by their parents for rejecting the religious beliefs forced upon them. And I really didn't know how different members of my family would react when I told them that I had rejected every religious belief attempted to be instilled in me up to that point. I had basically never had any meaningful discussion about religion with members of my family before, so I wasn't super aware of how important religion was to different family members. But, because I valued truth, I decided I was not going to suppress my opinions, and I was just going to jump in headfirst without any reservation, and come out as the atheist I was. So I came out to my grandparents, my father, and my mother in the span of a few short weeks. The results were varied. My grandparents were actually incredibly understanding, which kind of surprised me since we definitely did not agree on a lot of stuff, and I always saw them as much more conservative. But they didn't even try to argue with me or tell me I was wrong or foolish. And real big shock, when I told them about some of the horrific acts that take place in the Old Testament, they actually believed me and admitted that a bunch of stuff in the Old Testament is super sketchy. And thank the non-existent God, because I was seriously sick and tired of hearing every other Christian I met try to actually justify that stuff. I seriously don't think I've ever met another Christian who actually admitted to the blatant atrocities committed in the Old Testament, so thank you for that, my grandparents. You really made my day, and you have been incredibly supportive of me throughout my entire life, especially you, Grandma. My father was accepting of my views, though he still did try to do what he could to convince me to come back to a belief in God. Which, you know, fair. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with trying to change someone's mind. So thank you, Dad, for accepting me and hearing me out rather than just trying to attack my beliefs and shun me for them. You're a person that I feel like I can just talk to about almost anything. My mother, on the other hand, was less supportive. She was not happy about it, and was seemingly very disappointed with both me and herself for what, in her mind, seemed like a pretty drastic change in my beliefs. Disappointment quickly turned to anger, however, when she found out that I was planning to share my atheistic views with other students in my theology class for senior year. She essentially had a freakout and told me that what I was planning to do was completely inappropriate, and I had no right to try to spread my beliefs to other people who were just trying to live good and holy Christian lives, and me introducing anyone to different beliefs would surely corrupt them and destroy their faith. Alright, listen, Mom. If you're watching this right now, if you really think that just by me trying to make rational arguments to other students that their faith would be completely destroyed, then that faith really isn't very strong in the first place, and doesn't seem to be very worthwhile. You also have to love the double standard in this kind of thinking. You know, atheist evangelization is wrong and bad and is so inappropriate. Meanwhile, in Catholic school, we are literally being compelled to go out and evangelize and convert other people to our faith. I mean, yeah, a Christian authority figure preaching to a bunch of young, impressionable children in a controlled, closed-off environment with no opposing viewpoint ever presented? Totally fine. But an atheist having a discussion with his peers that are nearly full-grown adults with an authority figure in the classroom who holds the authority, expressing the opposite viewpoint, well now that is just distasteful. Because, you know, I was going to make Christian high schoolers question the belief system that had been imposed upon them from birth. And that's bad, because after all, when has questioning a presupposed belief ever led to any good realizations, other than, you know, these things on the screen right now? My relationship with my mother honestly became incredibly strained, and she said I was a completely closed-minded and disrespectful person, just for not buying into the ridiculous idea that the creator of the universe apparently decides to communicate through an inconsistent, horrible book with tons of contradictions that's been translated like hundreds of times over. Right, me. The one who actually questioned what I had been told in my life and did tons of research to find out whether or not it was true, listening to greatly varying points of view on the subject, whereas my mother had barely even read most of her own holy book. Yeah, I was the closed-minded one. Sure. It got to the point where she threatened to kick me out of the house, and she decided that she was going to take me out of the Catholic school I had been going to for 3 years so I could go to public school, because in her words, if you don't believe in God, what's the point? Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if I don't believe in God, then clearly there would be no reason whatsoever why I would even want to go to Catholic school, other than, the fact that I was comfortable there, was involved with sports and extracurricular activities, and community service, had formed really good relationships with my teachers and faculty members, had all my courses and schedules prepared, had actually come to somewhat enjoy the company of the other students, even though I thought I was weird. It was very convenient for me to get to. I knew my way around it. I actually rather enjoyed studying theology there, while most other kids were bored out of their skulls. And again, because I actually was open-minded, I actually wanted to take the chance to not just do research on religion, but to actually talk and converse with my religion teachers and students at my school to try to better understand why they believed what they believed when I found it to be so ridiculous, and possibly even interject my own opinion into the conversation once in a while. But I mean, without believing God, what's the point of it all? None of that stuff I just listed mattered to her, since I was an atheist now. I mean, granted, she was the one paying for my tuition, so I guess it wasn't entirely out of line. She wanted me to go to Catholic school so I could believe in God, and now she probably felt like she had just wasted her money. But while I might have been able to work out going to a different school if I had time to prepare and talk it over, my mom dropped her decision on me transitioning to public school 5 days before the school year started, 3 of which I wasn't even going to be in-state. She seemed really serious, and I was honestly terrified, maybe more terrified than I've ever been in my entire life, that my mother was going to change practically everything about the coming school year for me, when she knew that I had incredible anxiety in the past, and it would absolutely be the case that it would cause unneeded harm to my educational endeavors, just because I didn't believe in God anymore. And so, in a moment of fear and weakness, I made a decision that I was not particularly proud of. I decided I was not just going to basically drop everything I had been preparing for last minute and potentially jeopardize my future, so I basically went against my steadfast principles and lied to her, saying I was wrong and that I was being unreasonable and closed-minded and unfair, and that I had realized it was inappropriate to try to share my viewpoints with others, and even though I didn't believe in God, that I shouldn't give up on him, and that I was going to try to find my faith again, and that's why I should go back to Catholic school, because if I didn't, I might not ever get a chance to return to the faith again. Okay, technically it was more of a half-lie, as, I was still very open to changing my mind and believing in God if, I actually determined legitimate evidence for his existence, and I did want to learn more about Catholic theology so I could make a more educated judgment of the Catholic faith that I was raised in. That was actually one of the main reasons I wanted to go back to Catholic school in the first place, so I could actually, learn more. I certainly didn't think that I would be brought back into the faith, but that didn't mean I wasn't open to hearing and seeking out the advice or prayer practices of religious teachers. I mean, saying that means I am closed-minded would be like saying if a person is going to try a new food and they don't think they're going to like it, that they are not open to trying it. It's completely ridiculous. I didn't think my mind was going to be changed, but I have been and will always continue to be open to hearing people out, and never trying to shut people down and end conversations in anger like my closed-minded mother tended to do. But I basically still had to sweeten the pot when I was trying to convince my mother by saying that my life was unfulfilled and I really wanted to have a close personal relationship with Jesus, because I was lost without my faith, which, was definitely not true. I mean, at that point in my life I had more emotional control and fulfillment than ever before, and I had finally gotten a lot of my anxiety under control, and it was at the point where I had happened to cast off my faith completely. Coincidence? Well, I mean, yeah, maybe. I'm not gonna say that, me being in a better emotional state was just because I had left religion behind. Though, to be honest, it's not like there weren't any positive effects that came about from my conversion to atheism. The fact that I was now actually free from religious guilt and was able to question things was a giant weight off my shoulders, and made me more capable of grasping how the world operated and what my place was in it. Things actually made sense to me now, and if you know anything about me as a person, you know that I absolutely hate it when something doesn't make sense to me, and it keeps nagging at my brain, causing frustration until it is finally resolved. I also didn't have to feel bad about myself anymore for no good reason at all, and I realized that because there was no God, I didn't have this ultimate purpose that I was designed to fulfill, which meant that I was able to carve my own path and determine what I wanted to do in my limited time on Earth to try to make the world a better place. Becoming an atheist gave me, I think, a greater sense of purpose in this life. I found a brand new online community that provided me with a lot of interesting and entertaining content. I became incredibly motivated in my quest to learn as much about religion as I could, and for maybe the first time in my life, I actually had a semi-defined goal for what I wanted to do in the future. I wanted to become an atheist activist. So yeah, with the immense amount of character growth and opening myself up to a lot of new ideas over the past year, I would say that my life had improved pretty dramatically. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like every day was just a chore to get through. And due to my deception of my mother that she ended up believing, I was able to go back to Catholic school to complete my senior year. By the way, Mom, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I lied to you. I don't regret doing it because you were really seriously scaring me, and were trying to put me in a very difficult position at the time. And I definitely believe that keeping me in Catholic high school was the right course of action, but I'm still incredibly repulsed by lying, and I promise to never lie to you like that again. I love and respect you and care about you, and I don't like deceiving you. But still, I need to emphasize to you that you were the one who pushed me to do that. I mean, I'm not perfect, okay? I'm not. I certainly haven't been totally fair to you. I know I did some crappy things to you later down the line. And even though I vehemently disagree with you on this topic, I know that you probably worked harder than anyone to provide for me and care for me, even at the cost of your own well-being. So I have a lot to thank you for, but I'm sorry. You were absolutely in the wrong in this situation. Threatening to kick your child out of the house and transfer him immediately to a brand new school over differences in religious beliefs, while not even giving him a chance to explain his position to you, is bigoted. It's wrong. At least it is in my eyes. I know you've said to me when I asked you in the past that you were 100% sure that God exists. So I can see why you might come in with the arrogant position that I am wrong and you are right, and thus you don't even have to listen to me at all. But just a suggestion, maybe just read the actual holy book you are trying to defend first, like I did. I know I haven't always been the easiest child to raise, and you have a lot more experience than me in many areas of life, and know a lot of stuff that I don't. But don't assume, just because you are older than me, that guarantees you are more knowledgeable in everything. It doesn't. I know what I'm talking about in regards to Christianity. You don't.